Thanks so much. So I'd just like to, I guess, pause and focus now on one of the key reasons for holding this webinar today. And as I mentioned earlier on, we are actually approaching the first mandatory transition timeline, and this applies to Tier 1 suppliers. So the cutoff date for Tier 1 businesses, which includes businesses that are defined as Tier 1, businesses that are defined as both Tier 1 and Tier 2, and any new businesses to HARPS. This is your mandatory transition date. So the 17th of April 2023 for Tier 1 suppliers, not Tier 2 suppliers. That will be later this year. So what does that mean? It does mean that at your next audit, post that date, you will be required to have a version 2 audit. What it doesn't mean is that I need to have an audit to version 2 before 17th of April 2023. You just need to ensure that you continue with your normal audit cycle, whatever that is. For example, if your audit is in November every year or thereabouts, you continue on that same pathway. But your next audit will need to be to version 2 if you are a Tier 1 supplier. For businesses that are Tier 2, your mandatory transition timeline doesn't come up until the 16th of October 2023, which was basically a year from when we actually launched the version 2 standard. And we will hold a webinar similar to this closer to that date as well, and encourage businesses that have been through the process or are starting to go through the process of transition to just feed any questions that you have through to us, because your question could be helping many other growers and businesses in the industry as well. So key dates there, 17th of April 2023, we're hitting that timeline for mandatory transition for Tier 1. Tier 2 is not until the 16th of October 2023. So just by way of reminder, if you are new to HARPS, we will ask you to automatically transition straight to version 2, regardless of what tier you are. And for those businesses that operate as both Tier 1 and Tier 2, we roll up to Tier 1 status. So in part of this discussion, when you're scheduling your HARPS audit, the CBs are typically asking the question now of your business if you would like to undergo a version 1 audit or a version 2 audit. That will continue for Tier 2 suppliers, but for Tier 1 suppliers, as of that date, 17th of April, they'll no longer be asking the question. So you'll just be expected to go straight through to version 2. I just wanted to take an opportunity to remind those that probably watched our last webinar, but particularly for those new businesses that are just joining HARPS, and we've actually had quite a few coming on lately, which is great. We do have a comprehensive document library where you can find all of the collateral that relates to HARPS. Collateral meaning the standard, the guidance, all of the documents, and we'll go through that. So if you log on to harpsonline.com.au, you'll be faced with a screen that looks much like this. And where to find all of the information that can help you out is under the Growers and Suppliers tab. So if you click on the document library there, you'll be taken to a section on the standard that provides not only version 2, but also version 1 documents that we've got available today. So if we're focusing just on the version 2 documents, what you'll find is the HARPS standard version 2. And this is the condensed version of the document to the right, which is the guidance document as well. So the version 2 standard only contains the elements. It doesn't actually contain any of the guidance. And some businesses prefer to use that, and there's no problem with that. And the version 2 guidance document includes all of the elements along with some guidance to actually help support your implementation of that particular element. It's really important to note, and what we've really been impressing upon the auditors as well through training, is that the guidance isn't auditable. The guidance is there exactly as that, to provide you guidance for best practice, some ideas and ways of working, as well as why that particular element is actually important, why we're trying to cover it in this standard. To the right, again, you'll see the HARPS standard version 2 scheme rules. And this document is really important as it outlines all of the rules around our standards. So what an auditor actually needs to do to become qualified to conduct a HARPS audit, which is quite comprehensive. what the timeframes are for non-conformance closeouts and what you need to adhere to. And also importantly, if you would like to appeal a decision that's made through the audit process, what that process is. So initially, if you have an issue with non-conformance raised, for example, you can go to your certification body and discuss it with them. If you don't feel that your complaint's been justified, then you can raise that or escalate it to HARPS, and we'll perform an independent assessment of that appeal. So there's lots of rules, obviously, in the scheme rules as it's defined, and there are other things in there such as extensions and exemptions, all the rules around there. So all of that information you can find on our website, as in different sections of our website library, but also within that scheme rules document as well. To the right there, you can see HARP Standard version 2 summary of changes. That essentially goes through all of the elements as they existed in version 1 and how we've made changes for version 2. And we've received some feedback from suppliers that have been on the version 1 standard for quite some time and were a little apprehensive about version 2, and then called me and said, Belinda, there's actually not that much change. And I can agree categorically. There are changes, and a lot of what we have made to that change is wording and efficiency and removal of duplication and complexity, so that we're actually trying to provide a more clear standard with a lot more guidance to actually support suppliers and growers through the process of transitioning. On the right again, you'll see a document which is an internal audit checklist. So this is a version 2 HARPS internal audit checklist, and it is not a mandatory part of our standard, so you don't have to complete it. I do highly recommend it, particularly for businesses that are new to HARPS, to use this particular document. And it's really a great idea to actually get someone independent of perhaps your role, if you're responsible for the implementation of HARPS, to actually just take a view of how you're going. It's a great one to do before the audit to really help with your preparation, as if that person was an internal auditor looking at how you're performing in the audit so far.